Over the last decade, the Vikings fans have all been asking one question. What if the Vikings have drafted Aaron Rodgers instead of the Packers in 2005? Let's talk about it. So I have this whole in-depth discussion of how getting Aaron Rodgers in the draft and how that would affect the Vikings in the future. So let's start off with how the Vikings would draft Aaron Rodgers. In 2004, the Vikings had a very successful year going into the playoffs. Dante Culpepper was in the running for MVP as he was throwing to Randy Moss. But now all of a sudden Randy Moss is out of the equation. So the draft comes along. The Vikings have 2 first-round picks. With that first-round pick, I do see the Vikings still going with the bust himself, Troy Williamson, as they will be trying very hard to be getting past Randy Moss and getting a replacement. And as I thought at the time, Troy Williamson was the best replacement option. So 18th pick overall in 2005 draft, the Vikings select Aaron Rodgers instead of Essermis James. This happens because the Vikings, instead of going for need, are going for best available. Aaron Rodgers, obviously now, but then was probably still the best available at that pick, so it would have been a good pick regardless. Essermis James was a defensive end, so I do think the Vikings would still be trying to get a defensive end for depth and to pair up with the Williams wall in the defense. So in the second round, they luck out, get the best defensive end available at that time, and that just happens to be Justin Tuck. So that the Vikings not only get Aaron Rodgers, they get Justin Tuck, so they'll have 2 big pieces for the future in the 2005 draft instead of bust almost all the way around. So the 2005 season starts, Dante Culpepper is the starter, so Aaron Rodgers can sit for a little bit. But Culpepper only makes it through the first 7 games, like in the original 2005 timeline. So originally, in came Brad Johnson, who threw for 1,885 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Very veteran-like. Not a lot of interceptions, but not pressing the ball up the field. In the same 9 games, if we could compare this to Aaron Rodgers, his first full season in Green Bay, in the 9 games, he would throw 2,271 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. This is where we talk about the Brett Favre effect and being in a different offense in Minnesota. The weapons in Minnesota are a lot worse, and with no Brett Favre to tutor him, I do see the numbers dropping off a little bit. Instead of the 2,200 yards, I have him 2,100 yards, dropping him down to 13 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Not a giant drop off, but a pretty decent, significant one. Now, with the addition of Aaron Rodgers instead of Brad Johnson and a lot of other quarterbacks, how would this affect Troy Williamson? He was a speed burner that would be great at catching deep balls. Would this save his career? And I just don't think it would, due to the fact that his biggest problem was in his head, not being able to catch the football. With Aaron Rodgers being able to open up the offense, throwing it deep a lot more, this would be a lot more to his skill set, so he would have a better career, but probably not enough to stay in the league very long. Nevertheless, I do see the Vikings improving. Originally, the Vikings in 2005 went 9-7, barely missing the playoffs. In this scenario, I think Aaron Rodgers pushes the offense to win one more game to go 10-6, and they'll lose in the wildcard game versus the Buccaneers as they got the 6th seed. So moving up where they drafted in 2006, they originally went 6-10. So let's see how this will change. They had the 21st overall pick in 2006. They keep Nate Burleson. Originally in the 17th overall pick where they selected in the original timeline, they got Chad Greenway, but he is gone. We would have missed him. So in the 21st overall pick, instead of Greenway, I do think we'll still be looking for a linebacker. So I was selecting Manny Lawson, the outside linebacker, a long time guy in the original NFL, so it wouldn't be a big drop off from Greenway, but it would be there. It would still be a decent drop off there. So now originally in 2006, Brad Johnson threw for 2,700 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions. Aaron Rodgers, this is where I see him, he's going to go for 3,600 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. Big increase from Brad Johnson, but nevertheless, it's not Aaron Rodgers numbers that are accustomed to current day. But it's going to be a big increase. He's going to have a very good sophomore year. It's not going to be nearly as good as his fully starting year in the Packers, but still very good. And we're going to go 11-5. We're going to beat Seattle 28-14 in the wild card game, but unfortunately, just like in 2009, we're going to lose to the Saints 31-28 as our defense can't keep up with Drew Brees and the Saints. Moving on to 2007. This was known for Adrian Peterson, but he is gone. We aren't early enough in the draft, nearly early enough to draft Adrian Peterson, as he's going to go to the Falcons. Now, since we are later in the draft, we are going to get Greg Olsen, who fell very late into that first round, and that's going to help Aaron Rodgers out quite a bit, as this is the whole point of this draft, is we're trying to get players for our young quarterback. In the second round, Sidney Rice is still there, so we pick him up as well, as we try to keep this as close to the original timeline as possible. In this scenario, we don't have to sign Visanthe Shenko, as we just signed Greg Olsen, but we do sign Wes Welker and Steve Hutchinson like normally. Wes Welker, I think, will come to us because he sees the progression of Aaron Rodgers, and the Vikings are going to pay him a good amount of money because we want a good veteran receiver to pair up with Nate Burleson to be with the Vikings, as we aren't seeing a whole lot of Troy Williamson, and we're trying to push him as much as possible, as it's very likely his last year. But with the addition of Wes Welker, our offense becomes a lot better, being third in the league. Wes Welker goes for 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns. Nate Burleson, 630 yards and 4 touchdowns. 550 yards and 8 touchdowns from Sidney Rice. And Greg Olsen, 600 yards and 8 touchdowns, which is very good for him. He's been one of the most underrated tight ends in the league. So moving on to our running backs, we still have Chester Taylor, who is going to run for 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns, and be a great receiving back as well, getting 400 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers, his first 4,000-yard season, went 4,100 yards, 36 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and being in the MVP discussion. We go 13-3 and win the division. Unfortunately, we get upset by the Giants 20-17 in our first playoff game. This I see happening because we all know the Giants were on a tear in 2007 as they went on to beat the Patriots in that Super Bowl. They were so hot that year that even though the Vikings were in it, it was the first real time with Aaron Rodgers to test himself against the defense that was just gunning for him, and the Giants just got the better of them, holding them to 17 points as the Giants went on to win the Super Bowl. Maybe that could be different, but what can I say? I'm a sucker for that 2007 upset of the Patriots Super Bowl with the Giants. Moving on, 2008. We're very late in the first round. We draft Brandon Flowers as we need a cornerback. We have a very successful draft this year. In the second round, we finally get our running back of the future, who happens to be Matt Forte. We really want a good receiving running back, and that is what Matt Forte brings. And as you guys all know, who know the future of Matt Forte's career, he's going to fit very great in the Aaron Rodgers-led defense. And in the third round, another guy that's still there is Cliff Averill. So we get a very good draft, and the Packers finally draft their quarterback to succeed Brett Favre, and they select Joe Flacco in the middle of the first round. In this scenario, we do not have enough firepower to trade for Jared Allen, so no Jared Allen with this Aaron Rodgers Vikings team. But nevertheless, we have bringing for us a very high-power offense. Chester and Forte split reps. They each get 600 yards rushing and 500-yard receiving apiece. Passing game is on fire. Aaron Rodgers is finally here, and this is the Aaron Rodgers that you guys all know today. He throws for 4,100 yards, 36 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. And again, in the MVP discussion, Wes Welker turns in Jordy Nelson-like numbers, getting 1,600 yards, 11 touchdowns. Greg Olsen is on the scene, 850 yards, 12 touchdowns are the main parts of our offense. We go 14-2 in a first-round bye. First round of the playoffs, we win 41-31 over the Panthers, and then onto the NFC Championship game, we beat the Eagles 31-28 and inch into the Super Bowl. So in the Super Bowl, there is no Steelers versus Cardinals Super Bowl. Now it's Steelers versus Vikings. It all happened. 2008 is the first season. The Vikings win the Super Bowl 35-31, beating the Steelers, and they bring the first championship to Minnesota. In 2009, now of course this was a big season in the normal timeline. Let's see how it shakes out now. This is when we signed Aaron Rodgers to a big extension, a lot of money, probably the highest paid quarterback in the league right now. We draft Ziggy Hood to replace Pat Williams as he is aging. So we have a nice big nose tackle there. In the second round, no Loadholt, he'll be already taken. So we get Will Beatley, a long time off the tackle for the Giants. We go 13-3. We trash the Cowboys again, just like in the original 2009. But the Saints, we play the Saints at home. The Bounty Gate Saints beat the Vikings. They injure Aaron Rodgers and trash the Vikings at home 31-14. But just for a little bit of nice things, we're going to say the Colts win the Super Bowl instead. How about that? So now in 2010, we are in need of a kick returner, and we need more cornerback depth. And who is there very late in the first round in 2010? No other than Patrick Peterson, who was there. We didn't get Parsi Harvin in 2009, so I think this is why we'd really want to get Patrick Peterson. And now this is also a pretty big year in 2010 because the Packers originally won the Super Bowl. Can they do it again? They did it mostly because of their good defense, despite Aaron Rodgers being on their team. Now, the NFC North this year is extremely tough. The Vikings do win the division, going 12-4. The Bears go 10-6 against the wild card, and the Packers barely didn't make it. Joe Flacco couldn't quite push them over the edge. But in 2010, the weather stays the same. The dome still collapses, so we have to deal with that. The Vikings at US Bank Stadium beat the Atlanta Falcons 28-10, but the Bears come and we lose to the Bears in the championship game 20-17, and as our offense cannot compete with the elements. So there was up to 2010. This is what I have for this video. If you guys want me to continue this series all the way to present day to 2017, make sure to like this video and tell me down below. If you guys want any more what if scenarios, make sure to tell me that as well. But this has been JRoZ, and this is what if Aaron Rodgers was a Viking. So we will see you guys next time.